You grew up believing that keeping the peace meant staying small. And maybe you got so good at it that one day you realized you'd almost disappeared entirely. And the only way to breathe felt like walking away from all of them completely. That's what I want to talk about today. Let me start with something that might feel uncomfortable to say out loud. You're the kind of person who learned very early that your job was to manage other people's emotions, not help them, manage them. There's a difference, and you got really good at it. Maybe you still are. When you were young, and I don't mean when something dramatic happened, I mean in the regular, ordinary dailiness of your childhood, you noticed something. Maybe one of your parents was unstable in some way. Fine sometimes and scary other times, or calm on the surface but angry underneath, or just sort of absent, and you filled the gap by trying to keep things running smoothly. Maybe there wasn't anything you'd even call bad about it. Maybe it just felt like the temperature in the house could shift without warning, and you became very sensitive to that shift. You learned to read faces. You learned to know before anything was even said what kind of day it was going to be. So you did what made sense. You became the one who could predict it. And once you could see it coming, you could maybe prevent it. Not with anything dramatic. Just by being easier, asking for less, noticing what they needed before they asked, smoothing things over before they got rough, making yourself useful in a way that meant they wouldn't have to focus on you, wouldn't have to give you anything, wouldn't have to see you as a separate person with separate needs, and that strategy worked. It actually worked. You became the peacekeeper, the sensitive one, the one who understood them better than they understood themselves. People praised you for being mature, for being empathetic, for being the responsible one. And so the strategy solidified. You learned it wasn't just something you did in crisis. It became how you moved through the world. Except it came with a cost you didn't see for a long time. The cost was that you lost track of where they ended and you began. Their moods became your moods. Their problems became your problems. Their emotional state became something you had to check constantly, like your own internal compass had been replaced with a radar dish pointed at them. You couldn't tell anymore which feelings were actually yours and which ones you'd absorbed from them, like static on a radio you couldn't turn off. And for a long time that felt normal. That felt like love. That felt like family. That felt like the only way to be safe, but then something shifted. Maybe you grew older and realized that other families didn't work like this. That other people's kids got to have needs, got to take up space, didn't have to earn their place at the dinner table by being emotionally convenient. Or maybe you just got tired, so tired that you didn't have anything left to give. And somewhere inside that exhaustion, you started to feel something like anger. Not anger at them for being needy. Anger at yourself for still trying. And one day, or maybe over the course of weeks or months, you made a choice that surprised everyone around you, including yourself. You stopped, you said no. Or maybe you said more than no. Maybe you said enough and I can't do this anymore and I'm leaving. And it probably felt like the most selfish thing you'd ever done. I want to tell you what was actually happening because this is where the psychology matters. There's a term for what happened in your childhood home. It's called enmeshment. The word sounds clinical, so here's what it actually means. Enmeshment is when the emotional boundaries between people collapse so completely that you can't tell what you feel versus what they feel. It's different from closeness. Closeness is when two people stay themselves but let each other in. Enmeshment is when you're supposed to feel what they feel, want what they want, need what they need. And nobody ever has to say it directly because your whole family just treated your separateness like it was something wrong with you. Your independence was rude, your own needs were a burden. In an enmeshed family, emotions move through everyone. If one person is anxious, everyone becomes anxious. If one person is sad, everyone becomes responsible for fixing it. There's no quiet. No real privacy, even when you're physically alone. Because you're always a little bit in their head, and they're always a little bit in yours. And one mechanism that makes this stick is that you learned hypervigilance. That's just a clinical word for what happened when your nervous system decided it needed to stay on watch. All the time, always scanning faces, always reading tone, always trying to predict what was coming so you could adjust yourself before anything went wrong. Your nervous system never fully settled. It was doing threat assessment constantly, even when there was no threat. That hypervigilance kept you safe. It gave you some sense of control in a system where you actually had very little. But what it cost you was a self, a real separate individual self. You didn't know what you actually wanted because you were too busy knowing what they needed. You didn't know how you actually felt because you were too busy managing how they felt. And because of that, you felt like you didn't quite exist, like you were a mirror, not a person. Like the only proof you were real would be to disappear. And that's actually what happened when you cut them off. When you finally walked away, your nervous system framed it as running from danger. But something else was happening too. For the first time, maybe ever, you got to ask not what do they need from me, but what do I actually need? And the answer was so overwhelming it might have come out as anger or numbness or both. This is where I need you to actually hear something. The pattern that shaped you, the enmeshment, the hypervigilance, the constant emotional management. That was never a character flaw. It wasn't evidence that you're cold or broken or incapable of family. It was evidence that you were so emotionally attuned, so finely tuned to other people, that you couldn't survive in a system that asked you to have no edges at all. Your sensitivity didn't fail you. The system did. And cutting the connection was the only move available to you at the time. Once you see that clearly, a different question becomes possible. You get to ask whether distance is still the only way. Whether now, with a clearer sense of who you are, you could be in a relationship, maybe even with some of them, without disappearing again. I'm not saying you have to forgive anyone or let anyone back in. That's a separate conversation. What I'm saying is that the enmeshment was so total that you may have had to cut the connection completely just to find yourself again. That was right. That was necessary. But once you found yourself, you might notice you have options you didn't have before. You might find that you can be close to someone without merging with them. That you can care about someone without taking on their emotional weather as your own emergency. That you can sit in a room with someone whose feelings are big and feel your own feet on the floor and stay yourself. Or you might find that distance is still what you need. That's okay too. Start noticing when you slip into hypervigilance. Not to shame yourself, just to catch it. Notice when you're reading someone's face before they've said a word. Notice when you're adjusting yourself before you've even spoken. Notice when you've started feeling responsible for someone else's mood. And when you catch it, ask yourself one question. Whose feeling is this? Is this mine or did I pick it up from them? You don't have to answer perfectly, you just have to start asking. Because the moment you ask, you've already put a small gap between you and the feeling, and in that gap, you get to exist. Second, start rebuilding your own sense of what you actually want. You probably learned very young to navigate by other people's needs, so navigating by your own will feel strange at first, maybe even wrong. This isn't about being selfish. It's about practicing something you never got to practice. What do you want for dinner? Not what's easiest, not what no one will complain about, but what do you actually want? What do you feel like reading? What do you feel like doing with a free hour? These feel small. They are small. But a self that gets rebuilt through 1,000 small choices like that is more solid than anything that gets formed through constant adjustment to someone else. So we come back to where we started. You grew up believing that keeping the peace meant staying small, and you did that job so well that you almost disappeared. And then one day the only way to breathe felt like walking away completely. Now you know what was actually underneath that. You'd learned to vanish so thoroughly that you had to create distance just to remember you were there. Walking away wasn't weakness and it wasn't cruelty. It was the first time in maybe your entire life that you chose yourself over the system. That's not nothing. That might be the most honest thing you've ever done. If any of this is you, there's more of this on Apophenia. New videos every week right here.